Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us for this midday seminar here at the National Beef Association's Expo event. The title for this session is Building Bridges from Farm Gate to Basket, and as many of you will see, that I am not Alice Swift. Alice was meant to be the chair for the event today, for the seminar today, and unfortunately she's been unable to attend. So I am stepping in. I am Neil Wilson. I am the Executive Director at the Institute of Auctioneers and Appraisers in Scotland, and I'm a board member of the Scottish Beef and National Beef Associations as well. So I will be your chair for today. But more importantly is my panel of esteemed guests here to my left. And as we move along, first of all, we've got Joseph Keating, who is Co-op's Agricultural Manager, has been for between 3 and 4 years, having previously been with HDB Beef and Lamb, and hails from a beef and sheep farm in Ireland. And to his left, we've got Dr. Chris Brown, who's the Senior Director of Farming at Asda. He's had a long career across ADAS, MAF, MLC, before moving into retail with Marks and Spencer's, and then on to Asda in 2001. Moving along, we've got Laurie Ibbotson, who's the Assistant Managing Director at Dovecote Park, and comes also from a beef and sheep farm in the Peak District. Got that bit right, thank you. And then at the end, we've got Steve McLean, who is the Head of Agriculture and Fisheries Sourcing at Marks and Spencer's. Steve's been at Marks and Spencer's for almost 16 years and is involved in a family beef and sheep farm as well. So before we move into questions, I'm just going to ask the panel just to start and give us a couple of minutes on their view about where we are in terms of that farm gate to retailer relationship. And Joseph, if I could maybe just start with you, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. I suppose I'll give the overview before we go into beef. I think it depends. We've seen every sector struggle, I think, if we're being honest, from a primary production. I think rough in the co-op, I suppose for us, we do have good, strong relationships across our supply chain. I think beef at the moment, I think the prices are helping the relationship. It always does when they're good. So I think broadly at the moment we're in a good place. What I am conscious of, there's probably it's more the future and things coming down the road and how do we work together to address it. So I think that's kind of the space we're in at the moment. It's what's the future looking like and how do we partner, who do we partner with in terms of farmers in the industry, and kind of working towards that common goal. So I think we're in a good place, but I do think there's probably, if we're being honest, there's more discussions to be had. There's issues that we kind of need to work together on. And always in those times, it's making sure we're treading the right line, both to have, farmers willing to work with us, but also having that product on the shelf for consumers willing to buy.
Okay. Thanks, Joseph. Chris?
I think it's a really interesting time. I think it was mentioned on the previous panel, the extraction of government intervention in agricultural production and that whole policy shift, that transition. And just looking around, most of us in this room will remember Mac Sharry and the reforms back in the late, only you, John, and me, 1990s. And that was setting a policy of removing government intervention. And we were going to end up in a more volatile world with prices going up and down because that's what the policy direction was. And I think this is probably the past few years has been when that has really hit and really started to have the impact. And we're all turning around going, gosh, isn't this unusual? Well, no, this was the path that we set out on. And I think there's an obligation for all of us in the supply chain. And the good news is, actually, I think communications are easier now than they ever have been. And I think transparency is something that we can deliver. And we ought to work hard to deliver. You might not like what people are saying, but at least if you understand why and the background to it, I think it then enables conversations and discussions to be much better informed. And I think that's where we're heading.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Laurie?
Hi. Oh, God, that's louder than I thought. Not that I'm ever quiet, anyway. So I think bearing in mind the topic of the debate this morning, the panel this morning, is around the gap between the consumer to food. I think it's very easy for us all to sit here and start, getting a bit doom and gloom about the weather, about subsidy for environmental payments, etc. But I think we're at a very, very critical time for agriculture that never before, I believe, sat in my position, have we had the consumer further away from an actual knowledge of where their food and food production comes from. But that said, I think we're at a critical point also where we can change that. I think the government is now looking and willingness for education, and obviously that's the starting point. I'm very conscious today with my colleagues sat up here, everybody here is speaking from a retailer base, and whilst I represent retailers, I think today as a processor and the middle part of the chain, I'm very close to the retail side, part of my role, but I'm also very close to hundreds of producers, so I hope that we can speak on behalf of possibly the frustration of the farmer that relationship is getting further away from the end consumer.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Laurie. Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, we operate in a very fragmented industry, and you're definitely seeing different parts of that beef industry having different types of relationships with the retail sector. Some parts of that industry much easier to have closer links, in the integrated sector. I think the good news is I think there's a general recognition, certainly within our business, that we don't actually have a food business if we haven't got a viable, sustainable farming base. And we're definitely looking at how we can not only commit to farmers over the longer term, but also use that as a point of differentiation with our customer. And it is an interesting one because when you usually have conversations with farmers around differentiation, clearly price is a really important bit of that, and it is a really important bit of that. But it's also the asks of the industry in delivering something that is special and different. And there'll be different views in the room, and there'll be different views across the panel as to what that will look like and how that will shape in the future. But I do believe that there is massive opportunity to get more customer and consumer buy-in by telling a better story than we currently do today about the great work that goes on farms day in and day out. And Laurie's touched on it, and other two panel have touched on it too. Consumers are in a really interesting place at the moment. Yes, we've got a cost of living crisis. That has affected a massive section of society, but there is another section of society that isn't commuting as much as they used to and isn't doing the types of stuff. So the whole thing about disposable income and how that is or isn't available across society is really interesting, and it does create opportunity in the area that we operate as a business.
Great. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So, without further ado, let's open it up to the floor. I think we've got a roving mic about. So, in the good old-fashioned way, if you have a question, please feel free to stick up your hand and I will come round. And if you please, when we are asking questions, just give me your name. I am happy if you want to give us a sort of 10 to 20 second introduction. I do not want a 10-minute diatribe before we get to the question, please, or I will cut you off, I'm afraid, okay, because we want this to keep going to make sure we've got plenty of time for everybody to ask their questions. So, who wants to kick us off this morning? Oh. Sorry, I've got you were beaten to the mark.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. Paul Barnes, working with a group of farmers 2 valleys away from here, 50 farmers altogether in a group facilitation fund. So, interesting thing really. Saw Tom Kerridge doing an advert for M&S, looking at the grass. Had to go to Ireland to do it, or he went to Ireland to do it, I believe. So, interesting, looking at the grass, we're looking at the soil. So biodiversity starts in the soil, key aspect of it. Yeah. So biodiversity, water quality, flood mitigation, carbon capture, that's where it needs to start. We need to look in the soil. What we need as a group of farmers is somebody to help us tell that tale, to connect people back to the land. We have an opportunity there. So we need your help. So the question would be, what can you do to help? The interesting thing that we're facing here is continually waterlogged soils. That's down to government policy, EA policy, about managing watercourses. Some of it, complex, but we need that conversation. What is interesting is, there's a poll in the Farmers Weekly about what the biggest threat to my beef enterprise is. I can tell you what it is. It's arthritis. The second threat is saturation of our soils. No air in the soil, no biodiversity. We want to tell our story about being able to manage the land, and we need you people to help us do it. The question is, What can you do to help us get our voice out there?
Okay.
Great.
Can I,
Steve,
if I can go, so just one point of clarity. In the Tom Kerridge adverts, we don't go to different farms other than the farms that are featured. We did film in Northern Ireland, but that was for a dairy advert. Just, I think it's really interesting, the whole thing around how you integrate the story of nature as part and parcel of everyday farming, stuff that happens all the time. Now, our commitment to our TV advertising campaign, which we're committed to doing again this year, different set of farms, but it's about trying to softly land the message around the fact that farms don't just produce food. Farms already are massive in what they do in terms of the public good. Now, the issue that you highlight, and I'm not going to get into government policy for a whole host of very good reasons, we'll leave that to others, but we do recognise that there are huge challenges in different parts of the country, and you've got different NGO activities that are probably skewing some of the information that is in front of consumers through social media. Now, our job, or my job, is to make sure that we're presenting M&S customers with a range of products. And we try and be completely honest around the production systems, but portray it in the best light that we can to consumers. So our commitment through our Select Farm programme is to look at ways that we can enhance the farming with nature activities, but do it in a way that is marketable to consumers.
Yep. Thanks, Steve. Laurie.
Sorry, I think very quickly, just to add to that as well, completely agree where you're coming from, but I think I spoke at inner city girls' school in London of girls that had been taken out of normal education for various reasons, and they were put in a high care school in London. They were 14 to 18-year-old girls. When you start having dialogue with them, they don't even know where the food comes from. I was absolutely gobsmacked that they didn't even know that crisps came from potatoes. So it's a level of engagement that I think we in this room, you know, we have this conversation with retailers all the time about product and how long, but when a consumer is stood at a fixture and the decision-making process is 7 seconds on a packet of mince, or they might get to 45 seconds on a packet of steak, that's sort of the interaction you have with them. So the bigger campaign is about where do you start, because over the last 50 years, the gap has got bigger and bigger to where people actually acknowledge where food is coming from. So if you start talking about carbon footprint or sequestration or, you know, deep rooting soil to get aeration in the top, you know, you're losing people. So it's about what are these, I think between us all, it starts with you guys. What are the big messages? And then start and feed underneath them, because people's appetite for education is very different. But for me, it's about, you know, we've got some brilliant showcase of farmers in this country, and we should be really proud of that. But it's about tying it all together and put it in a package that people get their attention, because they're only on TikTok or they're on Snapchat for 30 seconds. That's your attention. Then they're scrolling through, you know, Tinder left or right. What do you like and what you don't? And that's all that the younger generation are interested in.
Great. Thanks, Laurie. Chris, you were wanting to come in?
Yeah, I was. I'm going to flip this back a bit, because I think farmers have been sort of shy to engage with some of this. And we need to have numbers. It's great to have stories, but we've got to justify the stories. So we surveyed 250 beef farmers in the ABP supply chain on biodiversity, your challenge, sir. And when you met, they declared the amount of hedgerow they had. And on only 250 farmers, that was enough to go to Lanzone, to John O'Groats and back again. That was a great story, and we put it out there onto the various social media feeds. So I think there's a cultural shift about not being shy about things, realising that if you want to tell your story, you're going to have to justify it. 40% of those farmers had an ecological survey, had a biodiversity story. How much stronger would the message have been if it was all of the farmers?
Just, do you get anything you want to add to that?
I suppose there's a few different bits. I think we have to recognise as well the bandwidth of people. We have a lot of consumers. So for the co-op, you know, membership owned, so we get a lot of different views. Some is they just want to hear the welfare story. Others want to hear an environmental story. And then others trust that because of the co-op, we're covering everything to a level, so they don't want all the detail. So it's striking that balance. I think it's been able to prove what we're doing is always the challenge. But the one thing I'd say as well, what's been an eye-opener for me is understanding communication works two ways. and we're very quick to tell the consumer should understand us more. We're not always as willing to understand them. And I think we have a lot of people, there's 70 million people in the country, they all have different challenges, and every retailer has it. You segment them, you cut consumer trends up every which way you can to try and understand them better. But I think it needs to work both ways a little bit, because we need to understand their challenges as well. So the story you're telling fits in with their life, not just, well, that sounds really nice, but what's that to do with me? It's total abstract to the way I live. So I think that's just, I suppose, in the communication bit. How do we make it that it flows both ways?
Yep, great, thank you. And I think you're right. I think it is a two-way flow, isn't it? Because I think as an industry, sometimes we're very much thinking about what are we going to tell the consumer, rather than trying to understand back from them what are they looking for from us as well. And that you are all the conduit for that, because you face them all the time. So, gentleman in the front, you were going to ask a question. Wait to get the microphone so everybody can hear. Thank you.
Very good with these. I'm a farmer from North Yorkshire. We have a traditional beef and corn farm. We have no fields any bigger than 12 acre. So we have all the hedgerows that you could imagine. We've never taken any hedgerows out. We have pasture fields, we have grazing fields, we have corn fields. Perfect environment for everything. But we've had the wettest year that we've ever had that I can remember. And how the hell we can start talking about what the government can do about it? We've had if you can stop the rain, then that's fine. But if you can't stop the rain, how the hell can you stop what's happening? It's just something that's happened. It's just that it is. That's how it is. We've just got to live with it. Now, I grew 120 acre, and I've had 70 acre. Well, I haven't done it yet because it's too damned wet. I have cattle turned out that paddled up to snaps. I have all this 70 acre to re-drill, to re-plough, re-drill. All because of the weather. Nothing to do with the government, nothing to do with anything I've done wrong. All to do with what we've had.
Yep.
Right? Now, just a quick one I was going to do with that. I shouldn't have answered that man's question, but that's my opinion. Farm assured. I send 90% of my cattle to Dovecote Park for Waitrose, and I have to have them 3 months before I could send them. Even if they've come from a farm assured farm or from the market, they've got to stop 3 months. Now, if I have some that I haven't had 3 months, or some overage ones that Dovecote Park don't want, or some cows that Dovecote Park want, they'll go somewhere else. But I've only got to keep them a month. Now then, I'm not to say where them cattle are going, but they aren't quite of the same standard of farm assurance as the ones that's going to Dovecote. You know what I mean? There's such a conflicting thing with this farm assurance.
So are we going to get a question about assurance?
Well, yeah. What about this farm assurance? Is it worth what it's called to be worth?
Brilliant. We got the question.
Thank you.
Good man.
Sorry about that.
No, you're quite all right. No, thank you. Backstory was good. Thank you very much. So,
I thought you were going to say...
Laurie, Dovecote Park, I mentioned a lot here, so we're going to start with you.
I thought he was going to say then, why can't I send my cattle if they've only done 20 days residency? I was thinking, oh, Jesus. Yeah, I think, again, this is a really hot topic at the moment, and pretty much walking around the event today, everybody's stopping and talking about farm assurance and what's happening in lieu of this week's meeting and Red Tractor, etc. I'm not here to say whether I think the conduit for farm assurance is good or bad. I think as an industry, and in all industry at the moment, what tends to happen is you get a baseline in everything, and then it's the same whatever audit. We're in an audit culture, aren't we? You know, at work in our factory, we have probably 2 audits every single day. And I understand from a farmer's point of view, you don't have a technical team, you don't have somebody to manage that. And a lot of you at this time of the year, particularly when you're calving, you're lambing, the weather has been pretty crap this year, the last thing you want is somebody turning up with a clipboard who perhaps hasn't got the understanding of your business and the current pressure that you're under. That said, you know, as we keep saying, that is unpack the message that we need to get for the consumer. And again, I'm not going to say about logos and whether there's any buy-in to that particular logo, but I think you guys around this table know that in any industry there's good and bad, you know, and we have to highlight the farmers that are doing a good role in their business, and we have to offer some assurance to the customer so that they know that that piece of meat in that pack has adhered to certain sets of standards. That said, you know, I think the culture of bolt-ons, so we would have a national assurance that would say you're fit to farm in essence. Somebody comes out and adds some bolt-ons to it. Somebody's come out and added some more and more and more. And it's become to a point now where are they pointless bolt-ons, pointless points of difference, or are they genuine and justified? And I think, again, it's the time now to actually reevaluate that, strip it right back and say what is fit for purpose, bearing in mind the original asset of this assurance was around food safety.
Yep.
And if that's what it's for, is food safety, it's to give the consumer the reassurance to buy beef. That is the job of that particular assessment. Where I am today is how, again, do we showcase and sell as much beef as we can to, you know, your fantastic beef, Ron? How do we sell more of it? And I'm sorry, and I make no apologies, that Ron sending to his cattle to us to a certain high-class retailer has to go above and beyond. That's that particular marketplace. Another marketplace, don't care. That's up to them, but sorry, you have to still do it.
Yeah. Thanks, Laurie. Chris, from an Asda perspective, what's your view on assurance?
Two-pronged. So let me first of all say we do use the Red Tractor logo on our beef products, so to recognise the value that we see in that assurance scheme. I guess the difficult bit is I need farm assurance. I make no bones about it. I'm going to require farm assurance if you want to send cattle into me. If you don't want, we don't actually have any bolt-ons, so we're standard farm assurance, Red Tractor. But if you don't like that and don't want to do it, then you'll probably need to find another market.
Okay. Just as a wee follow-up to that then, so you're using Red Tractor on the pack. Yep. Do you get any feedback from your Asda customers on what that means to them? So this is again about we're trying to build the links here between the farm gate. I think it would be great for the audience here to get a view. Does the consumer get it?
I think the challenge is, and Laurie's already said it, that they're spending seconds buying the product. Yep. People don't go into supermarkets on the view that it's a library and they're going to linger reading labels. Regrettably, they usually try and get out of the supermarket as fast as they can. And so you just have, Joseph said it, you need to think about what the customer's doing. From Monday to Thursday, that tends to be the action. They're buying food as fuel. When it comes to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, food is part of the leisure industry, which is why, God rot him, Jamie Oliver and all those people have got TV shows. Yeah. That's part of leisure. And people will invest and do different things as a result of that. But the idea, people like the idea that someone is checking. They don't want to do it, but they like the idea someone's doing it on their behalf. So it's a stewardship approach.
Okay, thank you. Joseph.
So I suppose coming back to assurance, yes, we use Red Tractor. I suppose just going back, take a step back in a wider context. I think sometimes in the UK, I'll need to, because of my accent, 100% British beef in the co-op. But when you take a step back, the competition to your market in beef not only have assurance, but probably go extra detail, extra level and have the data to back up a lot more claims. So again, going back, I know there was an earlier comment of, British is the best in the world. You have to be able to prove it as well as feel it. And I think assurance is a step in that. But I think there's a bit of we're the only ones. You're not the only country to do it. Other countries want access to this market or already have these schemes in place, and in some areas outside of welfare are adding more. We mentioned, and I won't say we're in full disagreement, but we mentioned it was set up as a food safety, going back to the days of 97. That's where it started. But like everything else, consumers, what they want, what they expect of a retailer to cover has increased. So now they assume animal welfare, food safety is a given, and now they're starting to go, we don't know all the details, but you're also looking after the environment, biodiversity. All these other questions now are starting to be asked. So the question of which assurance scheme or what, there's going to be asks, and it's going to be up to retailers to see how we answer those questions, and also what's the best way to do that for farmers, to make it easier for farmers. And I know that's another debate in itself. So I think for me, I think the challenge with farm assurance, in some respects, is its success, because it's one scheme that we can all work from. I don't think it'd be the best solution for the industry to fragment it into hundreds of different schemes. But I'm also conscious there's, again, going back to communication, I won't pretend as a retailer we got it all right in terms of communication discussions, but I think there is probably more needed to want to set the scene and maybe reaffirm why it's there and also what are the challenges into the future.
Great. Thanks. Steve, final from you.
I suppose I sit as a bit of a curiosity compared to my two competitors here in that we don't use Red Tractor on pack as a retailer. So we only source beef from the UK, but Red Tractor is still really important to us. It's the foundation of our Select Farm standards. I think there are three reasons why the industry needs to continue embracing what I'll describe as the kind of basic Red Tractor model. One is that if you travel around the world and you look at supply chains around the world, as I get the privilege of doing, I can't think of any export market where there isn't some independent farm assurance type scheme that actually puts a standard in place that customers can look at. Number one. Now, clearly I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that you export everything. For us, it's important because it's part of the trust credentials. So yes, we don't put it on pack. It's in our Select Farm standards. And we know that customers have huge trust in the M&S brand. Bear in mind too that we are also unique in that we are a known brand retailer. So we don't do guest brands or any of the kind of normal brands outside of M&S. So we're only ever as good as the worst example of animal welfare that usually surfaces at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon on social media. So I think it's a really important mark to be able to give consumers confidence and actually to act as a foil between a growing amount of probably high-level noise around livestock production, which is very different to what the reality is. And then the third bit for me, which I think it will be increasingly important, clearly there is a huge debate around what Red Tractor is and what it should become. And I think it's really, I'm not sure the current debate is positive, but it's happening and it's engaging people in the kind of thought process around what farm assurance should stand for now, when it was launched, what it should be in the future. But it is an opportunity for the industry to shape it into something it can be proud of and it wants to be seen to achieve. And I think that's positive.
Yeah. No. Thanks, Steve. Thank you. Oh, gosh, we've got a few now, so can I come to you first, please?
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm a beef and sheep farmer in the Scottish borders, but I also work for AgriWeb, and it's with my AgriWeb hat on that I'd like to ask a question, please. So we work with quite a few supply chains, processors, retailers, etc. And one of the big challenges we have is getting data from farmers, because they say, why should we? We get data for this, we get data for that, and we're not incentivized. So how do we incentivize farmers to really help us with that storytelling throughout the supply chain with the data that they collect? Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Emma. Joseph, come to you.
So on the data, there's a few things I think on that. There's one, we need to burst the bubble that individual data is worth a mine, it's worth a fortune. My data is worthless to Google. It's only good if they combine it with other people like me. So I think there's that kind of needs to be kind of unpicked. There's also trust. Farmers need to trust how their data is used and that it isn't used against them and it's used with them. So that's an important part as well. But the one thing that disappoints me the most going into this job, I firmly believe there's a better story to tell about UK beef production. I can't tell it because we don't have the data to prove it all the time. And I know there's a better story out there, and I've seen in other countries that when they have that data, the stories they can tell. So I think it is holding us back. I think it's holding us back because we can't shout about how good we are, because the question comes in, prove it. And it's a bit of a struggle. There's also a point around government systems and data. I think some of them are described as green dot technology. They haven't moved on since 1997. We know there's a lot of talk about it. But actually having modern government databases does a lot of the work for farmers, so that actually helps rather than them all have to do. On your last point about building trust, we partnered, and I'm not going to pretend it's going to change the world, but we partnered with our supplier, with Dumbia, and we've launched a beef sustainability payment. We're rewarding farmers for sharing the information. That isn't about me trying to own that data. That's about me being able to get a number of farmers together, prove what they're doing and reward them for it. So I think it's kind of this, I think there's this misconception that, and I'm going to use the majority retailers, we just want to own it all and hide it and not show anyone. There's more non-competitive issues around data that we can work together on. We're not fighting over that big picture. Yes, there'll be things we do with our individual supply chains, but if we can have that baseline for UK agriculture, I think we'll have a lot more to add to the positive story that's already there.
Joseph, can you give us, just to extend that, can you just give us a high-level view about what type of data you're asking your farmers in that pool to come to you with?
Well, look, we know at the moment carbon is obviously the big discussion point. So we do look at carbon data and get farmers to do a carbon footprint. That's the start. I think we're very clear as well in the co-op. Carbon is important, but it's not the only thing. There's a lot more to a beef farmer than just his carbon footprint. So and there's still, I think, if we're being honest around biodiversity and nature, we're probably where carbon footprinting was 10, 15 years ago. We know we need to talk about it more, but we're not exactly sure what to do. So it's trying to get a bit of a handle. Probably not an example for beef, but in dairy, something like what I suppose Chris mentioned earlier. I just asked our dairy farmers what they're doing. And the amount of videos we got of farmers talking about their hedgerows, talking about the ponds they built off their own back, no scheme, the passion they had for their environment and their farm around them. And it just shows you that, one, it was brilliant to see. The other thing is, how do I start pulling this together that we can talk about it? So the beef payment is based around a carbon footprint, but I made sure it's called a sustainability payment because we want to start talking, as well as carbon, as well as doing their bit to reduce emissions. Here's the other benefits as well, so we're trying to start to capture some of that. So it's a start. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, and it'll evolve as time goes on.
But it's good to know what that broader payment you're looking at is and what it's trying to capture. So thanks. Chris, can I come?
Joseph's covered a lot of it. I think the answer to your question is, frankly, we need better quality and better rigour around data. At the moment, I feel pretty nervous about some of the data. And if anybody came round and put a financial audit it, which if you want it to be monetised, you're going to have to put a financial level of audit to it, I don't think it would stack up. And this may be slightly contentious. I don't think any of the carbon numbers stack up, frankly. The NFU's gone through using the different carbon calculators. I think we have to shift the dynamic on that conversation and stop talking about emissions. Let's talk about what livestock contribution is to global warming, just to stir it up a bit. The Paris Agreement, Chair.
Yeah.
What's the Paris Agreement?
The Paris Agreement,
Yeah.
That's when they got the methane emissions data all wrong.
No, it says we're going to increase, you've got to hold the temperature rise in the globe to 1.5 degrees. Doesn't say anything about emissions, and that's clause 1A of the Paris Agreement. You naturally would know clause B, wouldn't you? So clause B, you can see, get Googling, talks about not hindering food production. Everybody talks about the clause A, 1A, not clause 1B. Doesn't say you continue to let Mr. O'Leary fly Ryanair planes around the world as much as he likes.
Other airlines are available.
And probably recommended. But it does say don't hinder food production, and we're not having that conversation yet. So I think there's a big piece, Joseph said it, about what that data is used for, but we have to start out with quality data in the first place.
Yeah. Laurie from Dovecote.
I'm a little bit concerned now. Joseph said he's given a payment for his sustainability, because I'm looking around the room, there's a few of our producers in here, and I'm thinking, oh my God, they're going to want some more money now. But joking aside, we've been collecting this data, and I think this again is about the relationship with farmer, processor, retailer, and to the end consumer. And I'd like to think, looking around the guys in the room, we've had this data from all of our producers for quite a while now, but it's a bit chicken and egg, because you give data, and the farmers, we ask, they give, because they understand we've got a very short supply chain. And I think this is a bit going back to the whole point about the seminar now, is around how do we get close to the consumer and stop the gap getting bigger, is to get, farmers together. And we've just done a series of roadshows around the country, 50 farmers, pie and pea supper in a pub, and get some dialogue and ask in the way that, is right to ask farmers to give and to give their information, but it's no good just collecting data for the sake of it. You know, it's no, you get piles and piles of data, and it means nothing. It's how you translate that data and do something with it to show the farmers that are actually giving this data, because they're giving the time up, they're collating it. What's the message behind it? Hedgerows, great. You know, woodland, great. Ponds, great. But put that into consumer speak. And for me, again, it's about the translation of the good work on farm to the consumer. Please don't be shy about producing beef, you know, because, again, carbon footprinting, everybody said, oh my God, beef's killing the planet, beef is bad, methane, carbon, blah, blah. No, it's not. It's not, and don't be embarrassed to say it, and don't be embarrassed that you can't go to a steakhouse and you've got to have sushi instead. No, you don't. Go and eat a good steak.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Thank
the end
you.
of it.
Steve.
I agree with everything that's been said. I think the bit I would like to focus in, though, is what data is just a term, isn't it? It's really what are the key bits of data that are meaningful. And I think that when we're talking about meaningful, you know, we're selfish as customers, so it needs to be meaningful. We want it to be meaningful so we can tell a story to our consumers, your customers at the end of the day. But also it needs to be meaningful in terms of feeding information back to the individual farmer. And at the moment, it is just a mass of grey. And clearly, because I wear two hats, I farm as well, I get it. I get as frustrated as everybody else around all the asks. So the big ask I would have of the industry is greater collaboration in defining what the right data points are and collecting and collating in a meaningful way that stops duplication across the industry.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. But, you know, farmers are great users of data. I think sometimes as an industry we don't realise, but, you know, you go and look at the auction prices that are generated to help you make a business decision about whether you're going to go and sell something the next time round. That is a great use of data. And but I think that last bit you worked on there, Steve, is getting meaningful information back into the farm gate to help decisions on farm as well.
Yeah, every one of the 4 businesses represented today have got targets, carbon targets, that we will all need to independently report on, and we are reporting on them now. But as we get closer to 2040, usually 2040 is the kind of major milestone around net zero at a kind of overall business point of view, the pressure on the industry gets worse. So if I look at M&S Foods, 62% of our carbon footprint is in the agricultural supply base. There's another 10% in primary processing, so abattoirs. So 72% for carbon footprint, I have to be able to find a way of mitigating over time. And it isn't the case of spanking a whole lot of money and planting trees in South America or wherever it is. It is about actually sensibly trying to decarbonise as much as you can, maintaining food production, because we are retailers and we sell food. We are absolutely committed to maintaining our meat sales. There's no commitment that we've ever made about reducing meat sales, so we need to find a way of able to achieve that. We need to find a way of mitigating as much as we can. And you'll see we haven't done it in beef yet, but in our dairy supply chains, we have actually paid farmers to adopt certain technologies. Early days, there's a whole load of new initiatives will come down the track, there's new innovation will come down the track, but data underpins all that, because if you're going to make any claim, you need to be able to collect data that verifies. And the final point I'd make on that is, we get data used against the industry just now that in some cases is 30 or 40 years old.
Yeah.
You look at how the shape of the beef industry has changed and the efficiency improvements that have been made in that time, and the base data is still reflecting an industry that's way back.
Yeah. And I think it's challenging to measure, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a challenging industry to measure. Joseph.
Just a quick one on the timelines. We all have our targets. 2040 is usually what we're all aiming for, but it's actually more intimate. Instead of thinking, oh, we have 2040 to sort this out, 2030 is probably our 30%. Yeah. We have key targets to get 2030. I would say they're achievable, but difficult. After that, they become more difficult. So we don't have necessarily 10 plus years to figure out how we get it all right in standards. We have to sort this out now, because that's the timeline. I think 2030 is probably that first big line in the sand, and then it's where do we go after that?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Hi, Patsy Hunter from the Scottish Farmer. I'm just wondering if you can tell me what the demand is in the various outlets, whether it's going up and down or down for beef, and how you are looking forward when critical mass is falling, and whether you're going to end up having to import beef in future years?
Yeah.
If the critical mass is going down, how are you going to supply?
Yeah.
Thanks, Patsy.
Happy to
Steve.
jump in. We're absolutely committed to British beef policy, and we will not shift from British beef policy. What we will do is invest in supply chain. So we're very proud of our pathway integrated Aberdeen Angus supply chain. We're committed to growing that. We do want to find ways where incentivising our suckler producers to be able to deliver the goods that we want alongside brilliant quality beef. And that's a project that we're running with at the moment. So I think, Patsy, your basic question around commitment to the UK and that commitment then relating into confidence the beef industry should have to invest for the future, I think is really, really strong. I think the bit that the industry needs to then do, though, is understand that in able to secure that future, there is going to be greater data requirements. Quality will be a key, but so will giving customers the confidence that actually buying beef is the right thing to do from an environmental perspective, as well as an animal welfare perspective, as well as a quality perspective.
Laurie.
Yeah, so I think what we're saying from a customer base, we've got multiple retailers, and I would say quality beef, so top end, native bred, dry aged, premium beef. We're seeing double-digit sales growth, which is absolutely phenomenal. And that goes a bit to Chris's point that on a Friday and Saturday night, people are looking for a treat meal. They're staying in, they're not eating out. Although we do some food service. And again, in that particular area, it's absolutely booming. So you're good there, Ron. The other caveat to that is the other end of the market. So mince is obviously a large area of every retailer's assortment. And that is basically price. So we're seeing that as a price entry that customers are buying into. The middle ground is the challenging part, and it's about rebalancing the carcass. It's about offering good value, meal deals, promotional activity, because we're talking about beef here, but obviously for us, our biggest competitor is other proteins, whether it be poultry, whether it be pork. So for us, it's about any animal that we take from you guys, how do we get the most value into that animal? It's about balance of carcass. So premium end is growing. I would say value end is okay. It's the middle ground where people have got so much choice and so much options. And make no mistake, as a consumer, people have been frightened about all the claims on beef. So there's a price element there with cost of living. There's people returning to work, probably haven't quite got the hours of the slow cooker and everything that COVID delivered in terms of recipes and everything else. But there's also the area around, disposable income. So they're buying into the cheaper end as well. So we're seeing the burger market. If we get some sun out, that'll hopefully lift as well.
Joseph, come to you, and maybe as well, when I come to you as well, Chris, just a bit about, we think of beef as being fresh meat all the time, but, it's obviously goes a bit further than that. It goes into other meals and things, what does that all look like through your outlets?
I suppose the co-op, again, look, we're the biggest in the convenience sector, so that it can be weather dependent. A bit of sunshine will go a long way, get the barbecues going. Broadly, we're in a good place. We do have some pre-prepared ready meals, but again, it's for us, it is that convenience element that's obviously the target of our market. Going back to the original point in the question, 100% British, that isn't changing. Co-op is very committed to its British sourcing. We never really a discussion. Again, always sounds weird with my accent saying that, but yes, against my brother's best interests, 100% British. So yeah, that isn't changing. I think the consumer, beef has gone up in price. There's always a challenge of protein, what protein to pick. Sometimes we're very insular and thinking it's just beef. Obviously there's a range on a shelf. You're competing with other proteins. You've seen how much chicken has grown in the last 50 years in terms of protein sales. So it is trying to have that offer. What I'd actually say is the biggest problem I see in the co-op isn't necessarily our beef sales, it's stopping people from stealing our steaks. So I don't know if you've seen it in the news.
Yeah.
The crime that we are facing is, it's such an eye-opener, like just listening to colleagues and what they actually, I'm not trying to make light of it, but what staff have to face into in the morning of people just filling up a bag and couldn't care less how they treat people. So I know it sounds a bit like an off point, but actually stopping it being stolen is probably one of our biggest priorities when it comes to beef at the moment, which you could see is showing that it's a high quality product that people want. I just wish they pay for it.
Great. Thanks, Joseph. Chris?
As a volume retailer, I do import Irish beef. I don't necessarily know if it comes from Joseph's brother to top up volumes. The market at the present moment in time is benefiting from 10% inflation at retail shelf. I think it's a astonishing justification for the quality of British beef or beef sales that volume is backed by less than 1%. So you'd really struggle to find another product that would take 10% increase in price with having basically no impact in terms of volume. That's not to say that you haven't seen shifts. So you've seen people coming out of steaks, not necessarily because they've been stolen, but because of price, and going into burgers. You've seen the growth in meatball sales and the whole variety of new product developments on meatballs. But when we get the product right, customers want to eat beef. So the current star product is a smash burger. You come across this, Chair? Mm. So apparently it's an American thing where you take a normal beef burger and flatten it flat. Anyway, that's some smash burgers. It'll be on your Twitter feed. Are up by 70% sales this week. So we get the product right. People want to eat beef, and customers buy it.
Great. Thank you. Thanks.
No.
But just on that point, we're not self-sufficient in beef as it is, so you're already importing. But that import, I think sometimes on a beef market, the attention always goes to retail. It's your food service. These is probably the questions. Maybe that's where that should be asked of what's the percentage of British now and how committed they are. I think if you look at the statistics, and not from any particular retailer, the level of British meat sold in British retail hasn't changed in terms of percentage of volume that retailers commit to. So I think where you will see those challenges, from my experience, won't be at necessarily UK retail shelf. It's probably in the food service where that initial impact will be.
I think that's a good shout.
Yeah, I think though, I'm trying to get to the bottom of your conversation. I think what you will see though is the relationship between retailer, supplier and farmer, I am convinced will change over time. So we're very used to a linear relationship at the moment. I think you will see it move towards more kind of tripartite relationships with producer groups, etc., and longer term commitment. Now, farmers either love contracts or loathe contracts. There's never usually anything sitting in the middle there. And I'd really love to understand why, as long as the contract is fair and it delivers for the producer. Clearly I'm going to have a biased view in it, but I think the opportunity for longer term contracts will definitely become more available in the future.
Thank you. Just before we draw to a close, so this last question, if this is okay, thank you.
There are lots of key buzzwords that go around the world, and at the moment it's sort of like carbon capture, food miles, etc., etc. But if you go back 25, 30 years ago, the key word at the time was vertically integrated supply chains, and everyone talked about that. And on the back of it, every supermarket jumped on it, and most supermarkets started to form some producer alliance. And so it comes back to building bridges from farm gate to basket, which is the subject of this debate. To build a relationship, you have to have two things. Like a marriage, it has to have respect and trust. Okay? Now, when that all happened, you had a breakaway, as far as I can see it. Dovecote Park and M&S are in their own football league. They're sort of not in the Premier League. They're in something quite different. They're quite unique. They're in the sort of Platinum League. If you take the Asda, Tesco, Sainsbury's, Co-op, etc., Premiership. But the Premiership is like a livestock market. It sets the base price. And if that's £2, then Dovecote Park and M&S will have their forward supply contract of £2.50 or whatever, and they have a much better supply chain. I'm coming to the question for them, don't worry. You understand the fact. The point is, these guys here are in probably a 5-year plus production cycle. So, first of all, do the panel agree that they have the trust and respect of all their primary producers is the first question. And secondly, if they do, and they're prepared to look at forward supply contracts, are they prepared to take on something that the government won't and look at a contract for a farmer of maybe 10 years plus, so he can actually base his supply chain of breeding a calf today to calve it at 2 or 3 years of age, to then breed it. So you've got maybe 6 years.
So can we go really long?
So I can sit down with a bank manager and say, if I bought a calf today, I know I'm going to get £3.85 with a ceiling upper or lower supply contract of 6, 7 or 8 years ahead. Guarantee them a supply, but also guarantee me a price.
Great.
And will they agree to yes or no on do they have the respect and trust of all their primary producers?
Okay, thank you. I think we'll be lucky for yes or no's, but thank you very much. And I'm going to come to you first, Steve, because you finished your last point on contracts.
I'm going to give you the answer. Look, we have 8,500 UK farms that supply across the whole of livestock. And I'm not stupid enough to sit here and think that we have a brilliant relationship with every single one. What we have done is invested in specific supply chains. So last Tuesday night, I was at a 25th anniversary celebration dinner with our 38 dairy farms, independently run milk pledge model. So the price is independently set. There's no M&S buyer involved in the price mechanism. It just runs. Now, milk's, in truth, bloody easy. You know, tanker goes up the drive, it picks, everything comes out, so it's, you know, it's ring fenced. Beef's slightly different because we have specifications, and you know, you've got age, you've got weight, you've got breed, you've got everything. And if it's a clean supply model, like we have with Pathway, then yes, we do commit to long-term contracts, and those contracts are based on cost of production plus models. The plus bit is a negotiation, but the basis that sits beneath that, and that gives that confidence. I'm quite convinced to see the delivery of the type of products that we need over the next 5-10 years, there will be more of that type arrangements. My business understands that it has no retail business if we haven't got a sustainable supply chain feeding into it. Now, I'm in the privileged position because of where we operate in the retail sector. It's not about premiumising for the sake of premiumising, because that doesn't work for anybody. But it is about setting a fair price that gives us a product that we can market to our consumer differently from commodity supply. So we are not in the game for commodity supply. We are about special and different, or differentiation, or different terms, but it is about delivering something that we can market differently to the customer. And the point I've been trying to make through this, historically, that has been about either breed or spec or quality. The bit that we are seeing is that as carbon becomes a bigger issue for consumers, it's relatively low on their list of priorities at the moment, despite what you may hear from NGOs, etc. But it is moving up. So we're trying to position what consumers will expect from us in the next 5 years or 10 years and build in the mechanisms to deliver their expectations. And we know we can't do that through the historical trading relationship that probably retail has enjoyed. Some farmers have enjoyed and some farmers have hated. So there will be opportunities for those that want to see a different structure and very little opportunities for those that don't.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Joseph.
I'm going to do what you're not supposed to do. I'm going to go to answer a question with a question. How many farmers in this room will sign up to a 10-year contract with a retailer? And how many farmers will stick with it, based on around cost of production or what? How many farmers will stick with it if it goes 5p above or below the market price? So it works two ways. I would love to have more contracts of beef supply, but in my 14 years in the UK, I've never seen them completely work, because as soon as the market shifts, they're gone. So it needs to work both ways. And that's not saying retailers have been perfect, but there needs to be a bit of a slight mind shift state. If you want to always chase a market price, a retail contract ain't going to work, because there's going to be ups and downs as the way it goes. I know we're all outdoor bred pork. We're on a pretty much of a cost of production. That works well because it's open, it's transparent. But again, going back to data, level of sharing, there's barriers there as well. I do agree, though, I do think there's going to be more integration of a type in the beef industry. The other bit, though, to recognise is we don't buy 100% of that carcass. We buy the products we can sell from that carcass, and then it's up to, and they seem to be en masse down the back there, my colleagues in Dumbia to balance that up. So that contract has to work for us as a retailer, but also they have to be able to find a market for the rest. And either then we have to pay even more because they can have to sell it less. So it's not a simple product, unlike milk, where it's take from the farm within an hour, it's probably in a bottle. So I would say is I do think there'll be more of it. What's interesting covering the other sectors is seeing where integration, and it's not all perfect, but where it works well is there's a market out there, and if you want to play in that market, fair enough, but we're here and we're trying to make it work where everyone gets a fair price and a fair return. But if we're always just chasing that 1 or 2p, they're not going to work long term.
Chris, come to you, please.
I've done contracts. First year was interesting. Second year, because I paid for the stores, second year I held on to the cattle passports. So it does, you have to Jose's point, you have to think about reciprocation. If you want to have commitment on cost, you're going to lose some of your independence because you're linked into a supply chain. I think 10 years is going to be very ambitious. I agree with Stephen. I think that there will be clearer markets, that the general national market will go, and that there will be much clearer opportunities if you want to take them. And if you don't want to take them, that's fine. But I think that will be that the market actually will become a little more fragmented or tiered, depending on what you want, which market you wish to access. And the farmer will have to think about that and understand what that market and what that customer is asking for.
Great, thanks. And Laurie, maybe.
It's interesting what you say about the loyalty of a contract, because I totally agree that the loyalty of a farmer can be a penny a kilo. And that's worldwide known. But it'd be interesting to see from the panel between what I call the Platinum League and the Premier League, how many people in the Platinum League have had contracts reneged because they're paying a good price and a fair and open price, compared to the Premiership, where when it's going up or down, the loyalty will not be there, because probably from the Premiership, the trust and respect isn't given, but they are the majority, whereas the minority on the right actually probably don't have as many failed contracts because they are probably doing more open book accounting and more cost of production plus systems.
Thank you. I'm not getting into the Platinum League, Premier League stuff, but thanks for that. And
I actually quite like it. But...
And I know we're not getting there.
There's a Scotsman not with
And so thank you. So Laurie, can I come to you for the?
Not want to talk about football.
Can I come? Well, I'm a Manchester United supporter. I definitely don't want to talk about football.
Well, I'm a Sheffield United supporter, so there you go. You beat us.
Can I give you the final word on it? And can you also maybe just talk? You know, you said at the beginning you're really close to the farm gate as well, and I'm not saying that the rest of the panel aren't, but maybe you can give the view that the gentleman asked very early on was about.
Sorry, I missed
what was that respect that between farmer and retailer was a sort of respect question. You know,
yeah,
could you
so
speak to that as well, please?
From a processor point of view, and sitting here, we don't just work with Platinum League, you know. So we have other customers, but I think the same principle applies. And again, when I look round some producers in the room today who supply us, many of whom, I think looking at you, Ron, because you sat there, bang straight in front, yeah. 25 years I've dealt with Ron. 26 years probably, and where we try and be as a processor is, you know, there's a lot of volatility in the market. What we try and do is ride out the volatility, and we make no excuse that we would like to think we're never the bottom payer and we're never probably at times the top payer. But for Ron, who's working on a 6-month, year plus production, we're trying to give him a fair and reasonable return. What I will say is we have over the years done contracts, and when you're working in an integrated supply chain from a dairy calf, you can put that into different segments and you can quite easily cost those out. So baby calf to 14 weeks, 14, you know, there's always the dilemma of, again, where does that margin go? Because historically in beef farming, there's always a winner and there's a loser, and the finisher will win sometime and the store producer will win another. It's about sharing that and giving it an even spread. Dairy's slightly easier than suckler bread. So what I would say is where we've tried to offer contracts, quite often producers have said to us, you know, and I'm looking at Mary there as another person who I've dealt with for 25 plus years. I think that, for the two producers just sat here now that I'm looking at, shows that we have an open, fair, honest, and we have a lot of regular dialogue. We have debate about what's coming on the horizon, and we try very much to have an understanding from a retailer point of view and a farmer point of view. Where we sit is we do have to have the responsibility of the carcass, so we market bits and pieces all over the world to try and find the best avenues. So I think there is room for contracts. I definitely think they have to be based on cost of production plus models, but similarly I think there's also that fairness, open, transparent and honest, and sometimes you don't want to have the delivery of the blunt news, but as a producer it's better to know. But I think unlike other supply chains, we keep going about pig and poultry, the supply chain is so short. In our model you keep saying 5 years, but actually for you guys making a farmer decision to change out of sucklers into something else, it might not be 5, it could be 10 or 15 years. So it's being able to work with customers who've got the foresight to commit. And I think it's all about commitment to give some security. Because make no mistake, in the industry we're currently in, banks aren't very forthcoming with money for farmers, lending is getting more difficult, you guys are struggling with cash, you've got to have some certainty somewhere. So it's about being fair, and I think it's about being fair and transparent. And it's not massive premiums, it's about not being embarrassed that you've got to make money, we have to make money, and these guys have to make money.
Thank you very much. So that draws us to a close. So look, a few thank yous before I go. First of all, to all the sponsors that have helped us bring all this together. For you coming along and asking the very helpful and very respectful questions. I was waiting for a Rami at one point in time, but it didn't come, so thank you very much. And finally from me, to the panellists, it takes a lot to come and sit in front of a group of farmers, let's be honest, but I think everybody did it well today. So if you could please join with me and thank the panel for coming along and giving us a good session. Thank you. There's another session on here. I think it starts at 2 o'clock. Please feel free to come back, but enjoy the rest of the event and thank you very much for coming along.